So this is the project I've been working on, which basically explores the consumption of serialized dramatic programs in the era of, we all know the so-called instantaneous and seemingly borderless and virtual binge ecosystem. And my focus in particular is on the streaming services of serial dramas in the PRC and the US, the two leading countries in content production and circulation in terms of sheer volume or quantity, not necessarily quality. My talk today kind of really just it serves as a teaser to mostly establish a context and a backdrop of a slow-moving project. It took me 10 years last time, for my last project. It's called Hollywood in China. And this book, I have no idea. So I'm moving at the glacial speed. So now I like many of you, I watch serial dramas from time to time. And the programs I seek out are mostly these days limited series, right? Once upon a time we called these mini series. Now the industry, they call it limited series, and which is a type of serial drama that comes with limited number of episodes. Frequently, I think it runs from 12 to 15 episodes, and carries the storylines to a final resolution. Now that's the key, carry the storyline to a final resolution. So for those of you who knows a little bit about the U.S. This history, right? So limited series such as Rich Man, Poor Man, and Roots were popular in the U.S. in the mid-1970s, inspired by the success of mostly BBC limited series in the 1970s, such as the Forsyte Saga. For those of us who are old enough here, though the UK ones were longer form of limited series. And limited series in the US gradually phased out in the 1980s and 1990s, partly as a result of the arrival of the so-called quality, long-running episodical serial seasonal dramas, such as NYPD, Blue, and ER, that aired on a weekly basis and with kind of infinite storylines that carry on through multiple or endless seasons, depending on whether the producers still want to go on, the actors are still alive, and right, you can go on and on and on. And so my hunch is that the new breed of miniseries with a finite serial narrative is fast becoming one of the dominant original programming for online streaming. And limited series is simply more bingeable in terms of time and attention span. Right? You can't possibly binge a seasonal program. And so as I wrote previously, I actually I did a film book a long time ago, and I shifted to do a TV. I published 3 books on TV, and so a lot of it is focusing on a narrative. So as I wrote previously, while discussing dramatic programs on the US network television, the structure of TV dramas falls into these 4 categories. Daytime soap with continuous or never-ending serial narrative, series with self-contained episodes but no final resolution. Think of like sitcom like Seinfeld, and primetime episodical drama, Law and Order, still going, right? And then there's a mini series that carry the storyline to a final resolution after multiple installments. And then of course there's the old-fashioned single-play anthology drama, which I think is some, you see a revival of this program format in some of the cable TVs. And so the difference between limited series and this ongoing serial rests upon the notion of narrative closure, right? A limited series envisions a fixed number of episodes that comes to an actual ending, which arguably allows for a better unity and more complexity in a self-contained story world. And the sense of ending also allows for more clearly defined beginnings and story directions. If you know how you want to end, you know, kind of you have a better sense of how you want to get there, right? And qualities that might be harder to attain through the incremental releases of never-ending serial. It can be challenging to convert a seasonal and never-ending US primetime dramas to limited series, but Chinese television dramas do conclude after 45 to 50 or so episodes, which makes the conversion to limited serial a series easier to manage. I actually talked about that in my old book and TV book. But of course, leading a charge in appropriating serial dramas for binge watch is Netflix. So we have to kind of really briefly talk about Netflix. So Netflix actually promotes binge watching as the intended way to consume its in-house productions, which allows for consumption of serial dramas across 8 or 13-hour episodes in quick succession, leading to binge as a new normal. And now, in a provocatively written book, Birth of the Binge, Serial TV, and the End of Leisure, Dennis Broe argues that serial in the age of the internet is imbued with a density that teases, innovates, and hooks audiences into one of the new modes of entertaining in its, he used the term, purposely addictive nature, what we conventionally identify as binge. Similarly, though, less critically, Jason Mattel, another scholar who studies narrative, in his book Complex TV, which was written before the advent of Netflix, etc., these streaming platforms, describes binge mentality as comparable to the compulsive edibility of a bag of salty snacks, which captures Broe's, of course, less charitable appraisal of the addictive nature of binge. In Broe's telling, the evolution of the serial model corresponds to the intensification of capital accumulation, particularly in the digital realm. His main critique is that the rise of seriality, both in the mode of the continued story and binge watching, is emblematic of a larger changes, not only in television and the media industry, but also in the very form, content, and a pattern of both work and leisure in the age of hyper-industrialism. And so leisure and work are all kind of intertwined now. And it is worth noting that though only in recent years becoming a viewing phenomenon, binge watching option had become available since, once upon a time, you still remember we have VHS, right, box set, and so on and so forth, and DVRs. So these were the kind of really earlier format of that kind of technology that will allow you to binge. And by the early 2000s, video on demand provided by cable services also become available. But the adoption of binge watch had been kind of relatively slow until Netflix came around, making viewing really, I'm quoting someone, it's called a mad dash for narrative payoff. Now, Broe argues that television seriality and binge watching have developed as part of this new model of perpetual 24/7 productivity or integrated work and leisure. Just give you an interesting example. So the other day I was watching, how many of you know Wang Gawai's new TV drama, Blossoms Shanghai? None of the students? Okay, only a few. Okay, so I because I kept on hearing people talk about it, so I said I'm going to watch it. And then I feel very guilty about watching it because it's 30 episodes. That's a lot of time, right? But I decided, okay, I'm gonna watch it. And then I justify myself, I have to justify myself by watching. I think this is working because I have to write a piece. And it just happened because I have a forum for a newspaper in Singapore. So I get to write a forum. So I get to write a piece about it. So this is how you somehow, this is kind of the merge. Actually, you do not know where the entertainment ends, when the leisure, when the work begins, right? And Broe calls this new narrative complexity with elevated addictive quality hyper-seriality. And he uses the term the attention economy to equate serial consumption with training workers in skills needed for the virtual economy through the lure and promise of leisure and relaxation or problem solving. In other words, you're rewarded. If you really kind of delve into it, you're rewarded, right? You discover things. That's why this whole fandom is about. While Mattel used the terms of forensic fandom, this is a very interesting term, forensic fandom, and durability to describe a viewer devotion, Broe dismisses it as a viewer addiction in the era of engineered attention economy. If you remember, once upon a time, television serves as a background noise. You have dinner, a group of people just watching it, they don't pay attention. Nowadays you can't. Everybody's just facing their own little computer, watching program with real attention, right? So when it comes to narrative structure and character building, Broe notes further that as addiction accelerates older narrative tropes, the cliffhangers becomes the multiple or multi-character cliffhanger. And to Bro's notion of multi-character cliffhanger, I think we are now at the stage of multi-mini cliffhangers at the end of each episode in order to propel the viewers to quickly click on to the next episode. Remember when you watch Netflix, it's just click, just move on to the next, right? And why do you want to click it? Because there's all a little mini, cliffhanger back there. So what we are witnessing is the multiplication and intensification of cliffhangers, what I call collusion between serial dramas, addictive quality, and forward-moving narrative thrust. And we're like moving like just really, mad mice, just keep on going, chewing. So unlike during the TV era, when viewers frequently treated television programs, as I said, as background noises, viewers now must give due attention to Netflix's original serial dramas because these dramas demand concentrated or immersive viewing. And we have now entered the era of an actively immersed viewing experience or metaverse. what Facebook would like to, Mark Zuckerberg would like for us to live for, or live by, or live for. So let me quickly shift attention to talk briefly about the longevity of serial narrative around the world, just very quickly. And I think most of you, are aware of this already. So a literary story format dating back to the era of a print medium, serial narrative has reinvented itself in numerous ways in the past decades, surviving successively radio, the traditional TV network system, the rise of multi-channel cable and global satellite delivery, shifts in domestic and global regulation, policies and ownership rules, and most recently, of course, the rise of Netflix and Hulu, Amazon, and of course now Disney, and Disney Plus in the US, and in China we have Youku, Tudou, ByteDance, Mango TV, iQiyi, and Sohu, blah, blah, blah. So, and there's also a lot of local platforms in East Asia. Japan has its own platforms, and South Korea has their own platforms. But South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan mostly uses YouTube and Netflix. They really heavily adopted US platforms. So as I noted in my earlier research, the US is not kind of a unique in its utilization of serial narrative on television. There has been an outbreak, so to speak, of serial dramas around the world since the 1970s, particularly in South America, Australia, the UK, and later in East Asia, with serial dramas dominating primetime programming in Hong Kong since the late 1970s, in Japan since the late 1980s, and in Korea since the late 1990s. And in China, primetime serial dramas from Mexico, Brazil, Japan, Taiwan, and Hong Kong became huge hits in early 1980s, just as Chinese audiences began to encounter US primetime dramas on TV. I don't know, Stan, do you remember these?
I remember Jolly Sun Gossip. I remember that very well.
So these were the shows. The kids here are too young. What are they? They are 90后, or 2000, after 2000, they're too young. So there was Garrison's Gorillas, a 26-episode show with a clever Chinese title, Dare to Die Squad. And there was actually a huge blue haha moment about that. I don't have time to talk about it, which was shown every Saturday at 8 p.m. on CCTV, primetime. And there was the China debut of NBC's 1977 science fiction serial drama, Men from Atlantis, 大西洋里来人, which was shown, also on primetime TV, CCTV. So these were the shows that a batch of shows that were introduced to China. These are the initial batch of shows. That's how think about, decades ago, those were the shows that Chinese audiences encountered. And the US serial and episodical dramas created a solid fan base in China. And so much so that in the mid 2010, when Chinese censors abruptly pulled the plug on these 4 US TV shows from online streaming in China, the move caused a stir among the dedicated Chinese viewers. And so the Chinese posters of the Big Bang Theory, you can see those, right? In what happened was in March 2014, the Chinese regulator at the time, it's called the State Administration of press, publication, radio, film, and television kind of issued 2 internet content regulation notices to root out domestic online shows of excessive violence and sex and require more vigilant pre-approval for online programming. Though the online content guidelines were mostly targeted at domestic program, Chinese social medias quickly began voicing concerns that their access to US shows might be jeopardized, right? And viewer backlash was clear in online poll conducted by Sino in March 2014, in which more than 130,000 respondents, or 95% of those polled, voted against banning US TV dramas, which kind of promoted government to come out and clarify that the regulations would not apply to foreign programs. So no worries, these programs will be fine, and so on and so forth. And the regulators in action on foreign exports really agitated domestic content providers, right, who appealed to censors for fair treatment so that they too would be able to compete with foreign producers on an equal footing by retaining juicy contents in their programming. They're saying if you don't ban the the foreign ones, why do you want to ban us? We should have equal amount of sex and violence so that we can compete, right? But things changed. By April 2014, the Chinese President Xi Jinping launched a campaign to rid internet of pornographies, rumors, and other unruly contents, which soon saw the ban of the 4 US dramas. And in response to the ban, Chinese viewers took to social media to openly mock and ridicule censors. Well, that was 2014. Right? The outpouring of disbelief and outrage recalled another incident 3 years ago in 2011. So this kind of incident recalls earlier time when censors removed, that was back in 2011, when censors removed Avatar from China's 2D theaters to make room for China's heavily promoted domestic film, Confucius. Chinese fans rose to Hollywood's defense, publicly snubbing Confucius. Even the China Daily chimed in, ran an article with the headline, "Confucius Loses His Way," accompanied by the satirical cartoon.
Yeah, I remember. I showed that in class.
That's, but of course, that's 2014, right? And also the Chinese fans of Avatar had a key ally on their side at that time, which is the market. Right? Because many theaters driven by bottom line simply ignored the government's order to remove Avatar. The government eventually actually backed down, restoring Avatar to more screens. But in April 2014, such a victory was nowhere in sight. The reason again had to do with the bottom line. Both producing and distributing, the Chinese streamers wanted to keep a lion's share of the massive domestic online market to themselves by cultivating their own fan base instead of siding with the fans of the US or UK shows. So what's the point of promoting these shows? We want to have more eyeballs for our own shows. So regardless of the tension, US TV dramas and comedies have been popular in China, establishing a fan base for the eventual arrival of, nowadays the so-called non-linear and non-synchronized online dramas promoted by Netflix. So here's a very brief history of Netflix. As a reminder. And so the company started streaming service in 2007 and ventured into acquiring exclusive original content by March 2011. The debut in February 2013 of the hour-long political drama House of Cards brought Netflix much needed accolades. So that's the way that changed the ballgame, House of Cards. And House of Cards came out to critical acclaim in the US, elevating Netflix onto the pantheon of quality programs akin to cable era shows, such as Mad Men, Breaking Bad, and etc., which appealed to the so-called quality demographics, right? So the educated audiences with disposable income who can and are willing to pay monthly premium for exclusive contents. Together with this kind of exclusive content, quality demographics helped burnish cable channels' quality and brand, which was also Netflix tried to pursue at one point. And the introduction of tablet technology in 2010 further allowed for the fluid movement of content among an array of screens, with mobile phone emerging as the dominant viewing gadget, particularly in East and Southeast Asia. I recall, I was traveling in Asia, and people just glued just watching shows on this little tiny screen. And I don't see a lot of Americans or people in Europe do it, but in Asia in particular, it's kind of interesting. And now, of course, they have these so-called the real show, like a 1-minute drama serial. Things are just moving so fast, amazing. And since web serials are made available online on multiple platforms, they can theoretically reach a global audience who enjoyed option of, accessing shows on the go and at the time of their choosing, when they're commuting, for instance. And that is, of course, if geopolitical restrictions do not interfere with the virtual circulation. So the question is the virtual world borderless? VPN has played an interesting role in facilitating cross-border virtual traffic, and Netflix knows how to leverage VPN. So Netflix's internal policies on VPN use can be divided into kind of roughly 3 periods. The first phase of internationalization, characterized by a relatively kind of permissive attitude. And the second phase witnessed growing external pressure for Netflix to adopt a stricter policy. And VPN provided many happy hours of streaming until Netflix introduced the anti-proxy policy in early 2016 and instead installed a new VPN detection technology, recommitting to geo-blocking as a principle. So the question is why? Why the change of attitude, right? Well, the mid-2010 was a time when Netflix began to expand into the international markets, capturing over 80 million subscribers in 90 countries by 2016. It could now legitimately enter the global market, and VPN had become a barrier for it to capture its international revenue, right? Thus the crackdown. So local barriers have persisted. And I can't tell you how frustrated I am. Now I'm in Hong Kong. I just cannot access some of the shows I want to access because Hong Kong's Netflix is different from the US Netflix, and VPN doesn't work. Although my students always have a way. And actually, they just send me the link to 30 episodes of Blossom Shanghai. And Netflix's metamorphosis into a global media, into being a global media provider, so has not been hassle-free, right? Because local barriers perhaps persisted. But Netflix has continued its global trial, and Asia has emerged as its most vital growth market. But when it comes to, I'm going to skip quite a bit of here, but when it comes to China, People's Republic of China, Netflix's history is short and its journey really precarious. Netflix's China ambition soon began after its push for internationalization in 2010. The company, let me go to the next slides actually. The company scored its initial success in China with House of Cards, a show that, and as I wrote elsewhere, marks the first time, really the first time, that a major US production put China at the center of its narrative. China factors briefly in the second season of the show, for those of you who still remember the show, with Chinese princeling functioning as a pivotal character and his ability to influence Washington politics as an instant kind of upgrade of the usual image at a time of meek and peripheral Chinese characters in most US films up to that point. Things of course have changed. That's just we live in a different world now. It is reported that House of Cards' largest proportion of the Chinese viewers came from, actually I'm going to ask you, what will be the largest segment of audiences for House of Cards in China? Take a guess.
Officials.
Okay, I'm not giving them an opportunity. You just jumped in. Okay, well, it essentially becomes like a handbook for kind of upper world mobility. Right. And so, right, so the largest proportion of Chinese audience came from the government sector employees. and with actually prominent CCP leaders publicly endorsing the show, much like Jiang Zemin endorsed Titanic years ago, right? Says, see, Titanic does a better job in depicting class struggle than the socialist, movies. And curiously, the sensational response of House of Cards garnered in China came during the same year, if you recall earlier, the banning of 4 TV dramas, 2014, the same time when the 4 previously mentioned US shows were banned in China. The 4 banned shows pale, really, in their kind of depictions of violence, sex, and more political scandal compared to House of Cards. And as I wrote in 2014, turns out that the Chinese censors' scrutiny over media content in its repeated campaign against the sex and violence and political transgression is not really about morality as it is about politics. Politics, in this particular case, House of Cards, which put the US in a very bad light, right? And economics rather than culture and morality dictated access in this case. Netflix's efforts to enter the Chinese market have been very fraught despite the success of House of Cards, which left a mark in popularity as well as influence on the development of China's nascent original web series. And Netflix's subsequent efforts trying to enter the Chinese market have all failed. But in an announcement for global switch on in 2016, China was one of the few places, together with North Korea and whatnot, that was left out on Netflix's map of conquer. Netflix eventually inked a deal in April 2017 with iQiyi, one of China's leading professional content providers, to distribute selected Netflix content on the iQiyi. And so just very briefly talk about iQiyi, very briefly really, and I assume a lot of you are familiar with iQiyi here. And a much more diversified platform than Netflix, iQiyi is the leading video streaming services in China, owned, of course, by Baidu. And most of its initial content was licensed from abroad, so foreign programming was crucial to the company's success, particularly among the upscale audiences, again, the so-called quality demographics. While government censorship began to cut into iQiyi's supply chain for foreign program, Baidu kind of founded iQiyi Pictures in July 2014 to develop and produce original feature films and television programs, and that's when it started to make its own programs. And in 2017, Netflix agreed to license some of its original content to iQiyi for accessing the Chinese market. And in exchange, Netflix must streaming a limited number of iQiyi's original series. 4 months later, Netflix announced the plans to release its own Chinese language content. And then by the end of August 2018, there were 42 Chinese dramas and 42 Chinese movies screening on Netflix, ranging from original productions to traditional TV shows and also Hong Kong productions. But the partnership eventually ended as many of Netflix's originals failed to pass the Chinese censorship. As one media scholar puts it, digital distribution does not come over the top of culture. It must negotiate the rough terrain of markets characterized by fundamental differences in tastes, values, cultural norms, viewing habits, income levels, and connectivity. Now, let me shift briefly to talk about the development of China's domestically grown web drama, which is informed by both China's own very rich narrative tradition and also by Chinese internet services exposure to limited series from around the world, particularly we're talking about Netflix in recent years. So here's the kind of very brief history of streaming platform. The early 2010 was a period of consolidation in China with Tencent Video of Tencent, iQiyi of Baidu, Youku Tudou of Alibaba pretty much monopolizing the streaming market. Mango TV, a streaming platform launched in 2006 by the entertainment-oriented Hunan TV, has become the 4th largest platform and really the only one who is really making a profit among the bunch. Hunan TV's popular drama and shows are shown on Mango TV at the same time. How many of you are watching the Mango TV? I actually saw, I'll give a talk in Stanford. We have a couple of people who worked for Mango TV, Hunan TV, which is very interesting. And web drama, so we have a platform. And what about web drama? Web drama has existed for a little over a decade in China, not a very long history. Early Chinese web dramas are what people in the West call the so-called low-budget comedy skits or sketches, right? And web drama in China in recent years has entered an era of so-called quality production in terms of style, storytelling, and narrative structure that share much in common with this kind of serialized US dramas that I talked about earlier, catching up or even replacing TV drama to be the place for quality serial narratives. It's interesting because I was in Hong Kong. How many of you know this quite well-known Chinese author, Wang Anyi? Not many people. Okay, so I guess the media studies students probably don't really do literature, right? So she's a phenomenal writer. And she came and gave a talk in Hong Kong recently. And when the question was asked, oh, what do you think of the web dramas in China? And her point is they're more interesting. They're doing more provocative things than the traditional TV dramas. But young Chinese viewers really prefer watching videos on mobile devices. So TV drama and web dramas now actually have different audience demographics. So a lot of more traditional elderly audiences still wanted to watch shows on CCTV. So here's a brief kind of characterization of the emerging web drama in China. And benefiting from the big data, Chinese web dramas are nimbler in locating its niche market and responding to viewer feedbacks. Chinese web dramas are mostly adaptations of online games and literature, which forms a self-contained IP ecosystem, which is a big term, IP. And Chinese web dramas are faster paced than their TV counterpart and tend to experiment with trendy new genres, science fiction, time travel, comic books, computer games, and now crime drama, which is the new thing. But the Chinese web drama overall is a little more conservative in comparison to the more experimental Netflix serials during the period. And for those of you familiar with Sense8, which is a cutting-edge science fiction created by the Wachowski siblings, right? And it is a Love, Death, and Robots, which is a collection of animated short videos spanning several genres, including science fiction, fantasy, horror, and comedy. And you don't see a lot of those in the sort of early days of Chinese web dramas. And the new wave of Chinese web series comes with fast-paced plot progression, a mixture of serial and series components, and also complex characters. So they become really more and more emulating towards the kind of US style miniseries. Now, the most interesting recent development since the 2020 is the arrival of a new generation of the so-called compact web dramas. Taut thrillers is the term they use, taut thrillers. Compact web dramas, or ushering in the so-called C dramas into the face of limited series. As Han cites in his piece for Sixth Tone, 2018 research done by iQiyi suggests that the audience dropout rate for TV series beyond 45 episodes rose to 56% in the first quarter of 2018 from 46% in 2016. So the gist of it, the longer format of TV dramas are losing audiences. So that's the gist of it. And now the previously bloated C drama was partly the result of the established pay structure in China, which is kind of very peculiar structure. The practice has been for a long time for TV stations and streaming platforms in China to purchase new dramas by the episode. So the past decade has seen kind of producers deliberately inflating the number of episodes to increase profit, Right. And then in February 2020, China's National Radio and Television Administration formally called upon new televised and online dramas to limit the quantity of serial dramas to 40 episodes, so still pretty long. And also encouraged producers to keep shows to under 30 episodes. Thus, Wang Gawei's Blossom Shanghai is 30 episodes. Right? So he gets the message, which contributed to the rise of limited series, particularly the kind of tightly woven original crime web dramas with compact narrative structures. And research suggests that limited series in the first half of 2020 were almost all suspense thrillers, which is the big #1 genre in Netflix. The genre played a key role in the rise of limited series in China. And leading the charge, of course, in cultivating limited series as a vehicle for crime genre in China is iQiyi. The company established in 2020 the so-called mist or light-on 迷雾剧场 theater, an online forum that showcases exclusive crime dramas. It scored a victory with its second limited series, Hidden Corner, a suspense drama adapted from a popular novel, Bad Kids, that features 3 kids playing amateur sleuths against the corrupt adult world that has implicated kids in a series of crimes. So that's the show, Hidden Corner.
有一天，农场里的狐狸要举办生日宴会，邀请3只小鸡来参加。
咱们又见面了。
3只小鸡为能不能去狐狸家里做客争论不已。鸡老2说：“
不去吗？”
鸡老3说：“去给他写一封警告信吧。”鸡老大说：“
怕我打不过他。”
最后3只小鸡去到了狐狸的家里。
进来吧。
他们一进门，狐狸就把门关上了，把3只小鸡全吃了，吃下了一堆鸡骨头。
这个故事还有另外一个版本。
颜良回来了。
我有旁边吧，来，我们走。郑平，我希望你还记得你还有个儿子。
等你们长大就明白了。
不明白也得明白。
你们真是奇怪啊！
别看了，
写信威胁我，又不告诉我你们要干什么。
不是我爸，让他打死你！那也是他爸爸。
一姐，
你以为你很了解他吗？
我想我们要报警了！报啊！报啊！我看警察来了，抓你还是抓我？
我的人生都被你们毁了，我还会再和你们报警。
你不是让我从小做一个诚实的孩子吗？
所以究竟是相信真相，还是童话？
我是警察不知道。
所以，你们选择相信什么？
It's a very interesting show for those of you who've seen it. You know, it's one of the quality shows since the Netflix iQiyi started to do these kind of crime dramas. So essentially, the show calls our attention to, among other things, the impact of corruption and domestic violence on the young and the vulnerable. And up until recently, the Chinese government control and regulation were not as strict on web drama as they were on TV drama in China. So web drama was able to kind of explore more provocative topics, such as teenage crimes in the show, The Hidden Corner. Such shows have come to exemplify seriousness in their thematic exploration and also quality in their production. Hidden Corner has been complimented for its trace of more cinematic style seen in the US limited series. So that becomes a benchmark. It has to be more cinematic. and with frequently, which was frequently equated with the notion of quality. And in fact, Hidden Corner lists Joe Kakazi, one of the screenwriters for House of Cards, as a script supervisor. Again, there's an interesting connection there. So as the Guardian report tells us, the show stands out for its look and feel in terms of style, story, and character building, with a more mobile camera and less dialogue, and shifted to a less theatrical aesthetic traditionally associated with Chinese TV drama. And so these characteristics were considered as more advanced. And despite its relatively slow pacing, a long-winded story development, which is apparently noticeable to my American audiences. This is supposed to be very fast-paced already to Chinese audiences, but for when I showed it to my American students, they would think, oh, it's still so slow. This is kind of interesting cross-cultural comparison there. And the production of Hidden Corner can be seen as an attempt to improve the standing of web dramas in the cultural hierarchy under the sway of US serial narratives. So now this is the time that we also have to elevate our status here, right? While Netflix has cultivated development deals with many known big names, from Obama to David Fincher, iQiyi too, at a much smaller scale has contracted known figures in the Chinese film industry to develop shows that addressing pressing social issues. Hidden Corner, for instance, was executive produced by the head of China Film Group. iQiyi Pictures recruited Wang Xiaoshuai, the filmmaker who did Beijing Bicycle, the Silver Bear Grand Jury Prize winning a winner at the Berlin Film Festival, and they recruited him to develop a show, and he made this show called The Pavilion, which is another crime series. So when they recruited Wang Xiaoshuai, so Wang reportedly said that he wanted to use iQiyi's crime dramas as a vehicle to explore various societal issues and to kind of delve more deeply into subjects that might be harder to do in a feature film of limited time and space. Indeed, the subject matter of quality drama in both the US and China tends to be controversial, although what counts as controversy differs drastically. Regardless, iQiyi's Mr. Theater, the forum that showcases Hidden Corner, has created a niche for suspense thriller that sticks to the kind of 12-episode model with varying episode length being dictated by the logic of story rather than by the uniformity in length. Building on the success of Miss Theater, iQiyi announced in October 2020 a new initiative to develop 2 additional genre-specific libraries of original contents, adding a romance-focused sweet-on theater and a kind of comedy-focused laugh-on theater into the mix. But however, when it comes to global reach, the Chinese streamer has been very slow to warm up to the global market beyond Southeast Asia. So it's really a regional market. So overall, political and regulatory barriers could be daunting for Chinese streamers to navigate, both in China and elsewhere. In 2020, iQiyi shut down its Taiwan operation following Taipei's ban on deals with mainland video streaming services. And then new guidelines were issued in China in September 2021, urging streamers to vet their online content for a clean and healthy cyberspace. We don't know what that means. It's very vague. And several popular shows were canceled and heavily edited during recent Chinese internet content crackdown. The other thing is really domestic censorship now has global ramifications. For instance, the suspension of a blockbuster variety show, Youth with You, the season 3 in early May last year left audiences outside China hanging. It was popular, all of a sudden it stopped, which really does not help to build iQiyi as a trustworthy brand name. And then there's a Knockout, which is a one-season, 39-episode limited series debuted in January 14, 2023. on Miss Theater, right, 迷雾剧场, and become arguably China's most popular TV series in the first half of 2020. So I heard it's very popular in the US as well among the foreign audiences. And so the body problem. And when iQiyi struggled to gain a foothold beyond the Asia market, Netflix has commissioned, of course, a big budget English adaptation of the Chinese sci-fi novel, The Three Body Problem. And the show is slated to be released this month. Is it today? Oh my God, let me see, yeah, so timely. And so let me, to wrap up what I have done so far, I mean, it really is to map up a rough terrain of milestone moments in the development of serial dramas in China and the US, particularly the recent revival of limited series in the era of streaming online binge. And as I move the project forward along, I'm particularly interested in how the storytelling function of limited series intersects with the dual forces of state regulation and market control, and how popular culture captures and in turn shapes the imagination of a new generation of media participants, including cultural, interlocutors, like subtitlers. I know a lot of people in my classes, media classes, they actually are active subtitlers. And as they navigate local and global forces, as well as the constraints of state commerce and culture. And to this end, I did some research on kind of fan subbing, particularly in the Chinese context. So I did this article that was published recently. And I was curious about the agency of Chinese subtitlers. What motivates them? What are they doing? And many of them volunteers, apparently taking the exercise of translating US serial dramas as a form of language acquisition and a cultural encounter. And so I just hand out sort of doing a little plug-in for my journal. So the article is published in a journal. Now, very quickly, and I'll get into the kind of meat of this talk, back to the concluding remarks. Now, back in the mid-1990s, Lydia Liu came up with the term translingual practice to encapsulate the role translation played in the dynamic process of meaning making and cultural building in the kind of historical encounter between China and the West. Her book captured about Japan at the time, it was about Japan in the early Republic era. And the result is what she calls translated modernity, a complex process of linguistic negotiation and interpretive power jostling that came with real-world consequences. Who gets to say what? Who gets to pick this to translate? Who gets to say this should be translated to modernity, or this and that, right? And Liu's book essentially calls attention to the role of Chinese writers and intellectuals in shaping the course of China's modernity during the early era. How might the politics of translingual practice play out in the contemporarily used cultural appropriation? It is, after all, the young enthusiasts who translate serial dramas, right? And in his review of Lydia Liu's book, Wang Ban, another scholar, began by stating that, quote, in the global market, it no longer makes sense to insist that a certain product is made in America or in Japan, unquote. Well, the Netflix and iQiyi experience with their respective efforts in border crossing and closure might attest otherwise, and challenging the conventional narrative of a modernity, cultural encounter, and cosmopolitanism in this kind of very fluid virtual world. And how might we make the connection between the experience of modernity in China's earlier contact with the Western language and literature and the experience of kind of instantaneous global circulation of serial dramas, and that is no longer demarcated by a clear origin, yet is clearly defined by its destination, right? And the stories streamers such as Netflix and iQiyi circulate via serial dramas in the virtual world frames our perception and experience, and also frames our experience of events, past and future, and shapes our cultural affiliation and identifications. Liu argues that the arrival of modern Chinese literature is the result of a cross-cultural breeding facilitated by translation, and as such, what to translate and why becomes the key question. What to translate and why? right? When it comes to appropriating, translating stories from other language and culture, who gets to decide which stories to select and tell and how? This will be one of the last few ones. And Liu frames her question as in whose terms, for which linguistic constituency, and in the name of what kinds of knowledge or intellectual authority does one perform acts of translation between cultures? And the thrust of her argument is that the meanings are not so much transformed as invented within the local environment. And the ability of Netflix to absorb and adapt to local tastes is an interesting exercise in active transcultural building. Shows like House of Cards and Hidden Corners are instances of cultural production through translation in this kind of audiovisual arena. And to paraphrase Kala in her book, this is a very interesting book. I think someone is studying anthropology. This is a very interesting book. And I was a fellow at Oxford, and I was reading this book with this group of modern China scholars. So essentially, he's saying circulation makes visible the otherwise invisible traces of power and its movements. And storytelling plays a crucial role in the social construction of knowledge and perspectives as we compulsively seek moral clarity, cultural certainty, and social cohesion, which is part of the reason why I kind of launched this journal. And audiovisual storytelling in particular can trigger instant corporal and emotional reactions that are central to our sensory engagement in the world. This is the last slide, Stan, I promise you. And as Casey McCormick reminds us of the addictive power of the Netflix show House of Cards. The impact of such affective audiovisual storytelling can be supercharged and is certainly worthy of a further scholarly attention. So I have a lot to say, but I think I should stop because we're running out of time after these moving and so on and so forth. So this is the talk with USC characteristics.